Hey everyone, welcome back to the Spoilercast. So I'm going to be alone on this one. This is going to be for Marvel's Netflix's The Defenders, which that's going to be covering the entire Marvel Netflix cinematic universe thing. It's weird to think about that also being a thing. So I'm doing this alone because out of the rotating Spoilercast members, nobody else has actually watched this series. No, not Shell, Wander, Bird, or Andrew. No one else, just me. Little surprised by that, but yeah. Just opening thought. Defenders, not great, unfortunately. I've now seen everything up to this point. Defenders just came out like this last weekend, and I apparently watched all of it over the course of a few days. Might as well start from the beginning. So 2 years ago, Netflix just kind of surprised us with this Daredevil show that was surprisingly good. One of the clear highlights being that Kingpin was absolutely awesome in that show as a villain, and that was a big highlight. I was like, okay, we have this off-kilter surprise villain, some cool camera work, and we have that one hallway fight scene of that's a really cool, memorable action segment. It's been 2 years now, so a lot of details have faded, but I really enjoyed the first season of Daredevil. So this whole thing was off to a great start. And at the time, I didn't even know that it was supposed to be part of a universe, or there was going to be more than one show. I thought it was just going to be Daredevil, and presumably there'd be more seasons of that. In the following time, they put out Jessica Jones, which immediately became my favorite, and has still remained my favorite of these shows they've made so far. Jessica Jones was interesting, not because it was just explicitly a superhero character, but because of the stories working around it. There were interesting scenarios filled with characters that had stakes and rules, and that's why part of what made it compelling. Jessica Jones themselves was an entertaining protagonist, an entertaining main character. David Tennant is a great casting choice for the Purple Man, and it starts exploring a lot of themes of trauma and control, and there was a lot of really enjoyable things going on in the way the show would interplay between the mechanics going on. Part of what was compelling was the fact that she has super strength. How do you deal with somebody that has super strength? Well, have a villain that can literally control you potentially, and obviously not omnipotent, constant control everybody, but there's specific mechanics and rules to how it works. And that led to really interesting scenarios. You developed characters, they had people that you liked, and that led to these moments. By the way, in case this isn't clear, this is a spoiler cast, so spoilers for all of these things. That leads to great moments of when David Tennant's character says, put that bullet in your head, and stuff like that, and they have to figure out how to stop their friend from committing suicide, stakes like that, moments involving characters you know about, intense situations because you know what is at stake and what the mechanics of the situation are and why things are happening, and it's all an interesting series of events playing out over the course of a season, and I had a great time. Then came Daredevil season 2 next, I believe, this is where the first crack started to show with the Netflix Marvel thing. First, we have Jon Bernthal playing the Punisher, which was fantastic, and you can absolutely see why we're now getting teasers about there being a standalone Punisher show, because Jon Bernthal as the Punisher was great, and Punisher versus Daredevil was great, and that was a cool thing, and that could have carried an entire season all on its own, and it probably should have. But then the forced part starts to happen. And it's an unfortunate thing that also happens in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, often a little more gracefully, but not always, which is this world building, this insistence on mixing everybody together into a singular universe so you can have the big crossover episode, essentially. And actually, you can see they almost slavishly recreated the exact scenario that led to the Avengers, because the Avengers had this setup of the... Is it exactly 4 different heroes? Captain America, Iron Man, Thor. I'm not thinking of somebody. I've got to not be thinking of someone. I feel like there was 4 of them, but it was the specific setup of you do the one standalone thing, Daredevil versus Iron Man, the first standalone thing, and then Like, oh, this is actually working out. Let's make a show for everybody, which is why everyone got their own movie and everyone got the extra and everyone got their own season of the show. And then you get the secondary thing where like, well, it's been a while since the first one happened with our pilot series. So it's like, okay, so Daredevil and Iron Man, they get a sequel before the big showdown. But that's it. Everyone gets one thing. The first person gets two things. And then everybody comes together for the Avengers, Defenders, like cross-universe crazy scenario showdown movie / season. It's like there was almost like consistently following that. And so since they decided to do that, then they started doing the really unfortunate thing, which is they start to mix this setup for the showdown in, which is kind of unfortunate. One of the nice things about Avengers was actually that they let every single show just breathe on its own. And so it kind of, everything felt self-contained. But starting with Daredevil, you start to feel like the shows themselves are specifically setting up the Defenders season, because they start showing us the Hand, and the Hand is so boring. The Hand is just not an interesting villain at all, really. The only thing I like particularly about the Hand is probably just Madame Gao as a character portrayal, as an interesting person to have on screen, and that stuff kind of works. Madame Gao kind of fills the same kind of niche that Vincent D'Onofrio did with the Kingpin in season 1 and so on, where it's just this menacing character that isn't always the one that's actually, like in her case in particular, she's not the one that's necessarily actively the aggressor in most situations. She's just somebody that sits high atop this grand organization of hers that is dangerous. And so she gets to just sort of weave in and out. She's very much like a specific similar character that shows up in Mr. Robot and a few other shows where it's a trope, but it kind of works. But unfortunately, we start replacing the Punisher with Elektra and all of the arcs around her, and all of the story surrounding the Hand is just so much less interesting than everything about how the Punisher was working, because the Punisher was an interesting character. He is a conflicted character. He's somebody that is on this horrible, ruthless revenge mission, but is not an explicit, like, evil force. He does things that are wrong, obviously, but he's not, like, trying to destroy New York, for example, like many antagonists of this universe seem to tend to do. He has a very specific revenge mission, and then that might be it. As opposed to the Hand, which is like they're hunting for immortality and they're a mystic evil force, but unfortunately they amount to mostly just being a bunch of faceless ninjas that are weirdly easily dispatched. Like the show wants you to think of them as a genuine threat, but they individually just all seem to suck so much. Like if you are a protagonist or a supporting character, you can just beat up Hand soldiers left and right, which makes you just wonder like how bad are they at training people. But as a group of as an army of faceless people, they're just not really an interesting villain. They don't really ever rise to the heights of characters like Kingpin or the Purple Man or even the Punisher as just being interesting, cool characters that are actually like shockingly interesting villains. We're so many movies now into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and even the Marvel movies have mostly terrible villains. Like, we like them for a lot of other reasons, but the villains are usually really thinly written and flat, and they're basically just a backdrop character for somebody's origin story, because a large percentage of Marvel movies so far have been origin stories. I mean, how many people can even remember the villain of Thor 2? Because it takes some work, and that was also played by one of the actors that played Doctor Who at one point, behind all that elf makeup. That was Christopher Eccleston, apparently. Okay. But the villains have been terrible in the Marvel movies, and the villains were surprisingly great early on in the Netflix universe, and the Hand is when the villains start to kind of get shit. So, it's relatively common narrative, I think, among a lot of people talking about Daredevil Season 2, saying that, like, it started off great, and then kind of just care less by the end of it. This was followed up with Luke Cage, which made the same mistake somehow. And I was really confused why this happened. So Luke Cage starts off with a pretty interesting power dynamic. You have the protagonist that you're setting up, which you've conveniently already kind of set up in the Jessica Jones show. and he's showing up in this other show that's further developing his character, and it's further showing his interaction with the setting, and it's setting up his motivations for how he generally does what he does and why he's going to be in the Defenders and so on, because he has motivations to protect this particular neighborhood, much like most of the characters really do. Well, no, just Luke Cage and Daredevil really are obsessed with protecting some neighborhood. Jessica Jones is kind of just floating around, and Iron Fist is an idiot, mostly. But Luke Cage, I was really digging the interplay between him and his villain and the villain's sister, and like that was all like that. This was a cool thing. I'm game for a season of this, and then I guess they decided to pull a shocking moment halfway through the season because they just kill off the villain halfway through the season, and it's kind of out of nowhere. It's not completely out of nowhere, but the fact that it happens halfway through the season means that they then have to really abruptly set up a new villain. And that villain was the most boring dude ever. Like, he was just a guy that wants to kill Luke Cage, and he's got daddy issues because everybody in every single Marvel property, or really just it seems like everyone in comic properties has to have daddy issues all the time. So now it's like this is like Luke Cage and the villains shared daddy issues, and he's got a super suit, and they're gonna punch each other real hard until one of them dies. And there was a couple of interesting scenarios here and there, but like the show just nosedived in a way that was really similar to Daredevil, where it has a really good first half and a really like, man, I'm not into the second half at all, am I? Hopefully the villain gets defeated so they can try something else next season, because I don't really want more of this. Then we get to Iron Fist, which was just kind of tragic. This was the first time in one of the Marvel Netflix shows where I just straight up don't like the protagonist at all. He is just... Danny Rand is an idiot, basically. And he's like forcefully an idiot. And he's so ridiculously naive and stubborn and just irritating all the time. Like, there was times where I'm basically just not even rooting for him to win, because I'm like, this guy just shows up and he's just the most entitled little shit, and I just don't really want to see him anymore. So he's from Kunlun, and which he will never stop telling everybody all the time, and he keeps acting surprised that people think it's weird. He talks about from being a magical world, even though he grew up in normal society. Not all the way, like he was relatively young when bad things happened, but like he's been in normal society before. I can't help but think like, like you weren't born in Kunlun, or you weren't like orphaned as a baby and then like adopted and raised in Kunlun. Like, you've been exposed to the real world. How are you so baffled that normal society doesn't know about your magical dragon world? Like, you should take that for granted that people don't know about that, and you should be relatively, especially after an episode or two, like, should be able to figure out how to talk to people about this stuff and not immediately just be the dumbest person about it. But nope, he comes in and he's super entitled about wanting to take over this entire company that's like technically his family's company, but he's been quote unquote dead for like 20 years, and these other people have been running the company, and like, yeah, there's bad stuff going on, but instead of just trying to solve the bad at things and trying to do good, he's like suicidally stupid about running the company. Like, he's like, oh, I own this place now, so fuck all of you guys. It's like, oh, I found out we're marking up drugs. We're now going to sell them at a loss, and we're just going to plummet this company straight into the oblivion. Fuck you, everybody who works here and requires this place in order to, be your source of employment. That it probably employs thousands of people, and you're just going to get rid of all those people because you don't like the prices on the drugs. And I'm like, at first I'm like, yeah, man, I'm with you. Like, this stuff is like, it's not cool to mark up drugs like on to crazy levels for the specific purpose of just making a ton of money, and like, that's a problem that actually happens, and like, you should try to help these parts of the world that genuinely need these kinds of things. But if you like, there's moderation here. If you just crank that thing, you just crank the lever to the exact opposite direction and sell everything at a loss and plummet the company, all you're going to do is just kill the company, which just means that your competitors will just do exactly what you were doing beforehand, and then you have no power to do anything about it. So it's like, he's not even good at helping people. His attempts at helping people are also stupid, even though their naivete. And it's just, he's so frustrating, but he's also just kind of a shitty person a lot of the time. Like, he gets given refuge by somebody. Like, okay, you can stay here, it's fine, just don't talk to the students. And Danny Rand's definition of don't talk to students is assault the students. He instead of staying away from the students, he attacks the students. That's not the same thing. You are really bad at being a guest. Did they not teach you how to be a guest at Kunlun? That's aren't they all about like tradition and stuff like that? They don't teach you like basic etiquette for staying at somebody's house? Like, and he's just so thick all the time, and I just don't like watching him. In every single episode, he's like, no, I have to do this. This is the thing that has to happen. I won't talk about it, and I won't reason with anybody. This is happening now. I solve all my problems by punching things, and I solve those things by walking straight at the direction of the thing that I think is the direction of the guy I need to punch, and then I punch them, and that's pretty much my entire process. And I'm like, holy shit, man. Like, this is probably why in the modern Avengers movies, they never gave Hulk his standalone movie. Like, Hulk might be getting more and more intelligent as the movies go on, and so like he might get a bigger role later, but at the beginning, like, yeah, the guy that just punches stuff is like a supporting character, not a main character. Like, in fact, there are dudes that just punch shit that are supporting characters in other Marvel Netflix shows, but somehow Iron Fist got his own show, and it's so boring because he's irritating and he's flat, and he has so little texture to his character compared to the other three Marvel Netflix protagonists. But on top of that, his entire show is him facing off against the Hand. And it's like, no, not the Hand. The Hand, we've established this, the Hand sucks. They're so boring. They're so boring that not even like Ninja Turtles can make a parody of them interesting in the form of the Foot. And also, yeah, like, it's concerning that we're starting with a property where the villain is so boring that the parody of them is more world famous than they are. More people on Earth, I believe, probably know who the Foot are than the Hand. Because the Hand is so shitty, you have to parody them to even start to get memorable. Because they're so boring. Because they're just the most generic shit. Like, it's like if somebody made a D&D campaign where they just took the elements from the player's handbook and just made that the campaign and didn't make up a world at all and didn't make up character motivations or any texture. They were just like, orcs exist in this universe. Your villain's orcs. That's it. What? No. Your villain's ninjas. They want, I don't know, immortality? Sure. Go fight the ninjas for like 12 hours. It's like, they're so boring. But at least we get to start the slightly interesting thing that they could do, which is the unfortunately has also been explored in their parody, because it's already been explored by Ninja Turtles in the movies, which is like I grew up watching that Secret of the Ooze and like having Kino infiltrate the Foot organization, and they're trying to take them apart from the inside and figure out what their plan is and stuff. Like, we've been through all their indoctrination systems and hiring people off the street in the parody version. And frankly, that was basically better done than most of what happened in Iron Fist, which was just so rote and boring when it dealt with the inner politics of people being indoctrinated into this organization. But I'll say that was the most interesting part of the entire Iron Fist season, was probably just dealing with this group of people that, like, how they are just ripping people off the streets. Although so many of these organizations just rip people off the streets to have them do horrible things, that you start to wonder how there even are teenagers left in New York to, like, do anything else besides be in criminal organizations at some point, because that's such a reoccurring thing. The main highlight of the Iron Fist season was probably the ongoing, like, fucked up relationship between one of the villains and their son, which is a name that's unfortunately completely escaping me now, but the blonde guy that has to be hidden away in his tower forever, and his son has been running the company instead and is the only one that knows he's alive, and all that stuff going on. Like, that was kind of interesting. There was definitely just elements of like, why do I feel like I'm watching Arrow again? Was definitely a feeling I had on a regular basis while watching Iron Fist, but really it was just, there was not much to save. There's not much that could be done to save the show when it was so focused on the Hand, and its protagonist was this guy which was just not great. And it's also been famously known now that like the kung fu stuff, all the martial arts in Iron Fist is just kind of garbage, and that's largely because apparently they were just filming this on a super tight schedule, and the lead actor didn't know how to handle any of this stuff. He wasn't already trained, so they would just kind of like run him through the choreography like right before the scene, and then they would just give it a few takes and then move on because they didn't have time. And so like that was a huge misstep, probably, to be so focused on the schedule, like how Marvel handles its movies, that they had to have Iron Fist out on this time so that Defenders could be out at this time, and then like that's the insistence on doing it that fast clearly only made the show suffer. And that probably is what happened here, is that Iron Fist and Daredevil and Jessica Jones were so like inspired. There's really cool shit happening, and there's really interesting themes at play, and it felt like it had time to cook. But as you go on through the seasons of this like universe, you get more and more sense that every season is getting more and more rushed, and that they have to meet deadlines, and that it's supposed to come out this time, and so they don't have time to add all these flourishes to the script to make the characters and the stories more interesting, and they don't have time to finish the choreography, and they don't have time to do cool stuff anymore. So the fight scenes in particular are just getting more and more boring, and the reasons people are fighting are getting more and more boring, and it's just becoming a pale imitation of what the first couple of seasons largely were, which is just really unfortunate. Because yeah, like Iron Fist, like there better be some, like, this should feel like I'm watching a kung fu show, right? Like this should be some really cool shit going on, and instead it was a lot of really boring punching and a lot of like really awkward looking shots where it looks like maybe they were speeding up the shot to make it look cooler, or they were like rapidly doing cuts like Liam Neeson jumping over a fence in order to like pretend he was more badass than he was, because the actor just wasn't selling it, and then they couldn't recast him, or they couldn't like keep practicing because there was a deadline before the show had to be put out, and that's not a good creative setting. Like some people will reflexively want to defend the stuff because they'll just want to defend the entire universe and stuff like that, but it's like, no, like we know the background now. It's like this is too rushed. This is too rapidly put together. This is too forced. The creativity is not getting a chance to breathe. The script writing is just suffering. Everybody's just focused on hitting deadlines instead of like making a quality thing. And like, you probably shouldn't be satisfied with that, because that's not a good setting in which anything should be made. So then we roll around to Defenders, and I'm just a little resigned at this point because I'm like, oh, fuck. It's about the hand again. This is now season 6, by the way, of the Netflix original Marvel Cinematic Universe thing, and we're still dealing with the hand now. Out of 6 seasons, this is now 2.5 seasons where the villain is the Hand, which is just such a bummer because they're so not interesting. The Hand is the kind of boring villain that you throw together for like a plot line, maybe, not like half of your 6-season show. Think about that. 6 seasons. Like, I don't want to check. Let's just check. Let's see. Breaking Bad wiki. Out of curiosity, because I'm thinking, like, how many episodes was Breaking Bad in its totality? It might have been longer. No, it's not. No, it's not. Yeah, Breaking Bad was 5 seasons of 7, 13, 13, 13, 16. So, no. So this show's longer than Breaking Bad already, but it's had 2.5 seasons to just spend on the Hand. And how interesting is the Hand? How developed is the Hand? How cool of a villain are they? Or, like, how invested are we in the struggle against fighting the Hand? Honestly, not particularly. They're kind of ninjas, kind of not. And in fact, that's a point to bring up here, is that in Defenders, you can kind of say goodbye to most of the whole ninja thing. For a large portion of the show, they just don't have an army anymore. For huge chunks of the show, we have the Hand, which is the literal Hand, and then it's the 5 main people. The leadership of the Hand, that's the main villain of this, is the actual 5 people as opposed to the organization as a whole. And Elektra, because Elektra died during Daredevil season 2 and comes back to life, which is something everyone should have been ready for based on the whole Daredevil Elektra movies back in the day that were not great back in the time. with Daredevil being not great and Elektra being downright some hot garbage that I've tried to sit through a few times, and I think I've technically made it, but I think I always get kind of checked out. So that's our grand villain, is that sorry, the Hand of resurrected Elektra without her memories. She is evil now. She's called the Black Sky. A lot of details of what the Black Sky means and what it's for and what they expect of that is generally not explained, and in general the Hand is not very well developed for this particular season, which is just kind of a bummer because, like, we are getting close to, like, the 20-hour mark of dealing with the Hand, so it's like we should really have a lot more to go on with these people. The Defenders is different from the other seasons because instead of being the usual 13-episode season, it's an 8-episode season, and some of those episodes are only 45 minutes long, which is a little shorter than usual for the just Netflix shows in general. So it's relatively short on duration and time. So with you think that they'd be really efficient, right, with this limited space, but instead they're kind of not. The first episode of Defenders is almost entirely like just the show spinning its wheels. It's about an hour long. It's one of the longer episodes of the season, and they basically just reintroduce every single character. So they show you Daredevil and his supporting characters. They show you Iron Fist and his supporting characters. They show you Luke Cage and Jessica Jones and their supporting characters. And it's basically just like a status check on every single character in their universe right now, just one by one. Not much going on. The ever so slight introduction of the potential maybe threat. A few scenes with Sigourney Weaver being mysteriously sinister because Sigourney Weaver is the leader of the Hand in this. She just shows up, and she's just being mysterious mostly until the very end of the episode, which is that, like, an earthquake happens. Like, oh no, the inciting incident, it's finally happened. It takes an hour to get there. Then you spend the entire second hour with the show trying to come up with excuses for these characters to come up to encounter each other. Both of which are okay. One of them, which is how the episode ends, is very, very foregone conclusion how it's going to happen. You're like, oh, Daredevil's a lawyer, so he's going to meet somebody because somebody's going to get arrested, and then he's going to like, I'm going to represent you, don't say no more, and stuff like that. And that's exactly what happens. Jessica Jones gets arrested, and Daredevil just walks on in like, yeah, I'm here to represent you. I'm like, oh, there we go. I was waiting for it to happen, and it happened. The other thing that happens is that Iron Fist is just forcing his way into dealing with investigating the Hand, and so he's just stupidly charging in head first into scenarios because that's what he always does. And Iron Fist, I always want to call him Iron Fist also because I keep wanting to call Luke Cage Iron Fist because he's a character who punches people also and is indestructible. So I always want to Iron make sense. That's the theme, by the way, is that 3 of the characters in this cast just punch people, which is not very interesting to watch. Luke Cage is investigating a crime syndicate that is apparently recruiting young boys from Harlem. And so he shows up at the same place as Iron Fist, and they fight because a particular boy that Luke Cage was trying to get out of trouble is the exact person that Iron Fist happens to catch, so they fight, and that's the obligatory, like, oh, the people have to fight before they can become allies, because that's the first thing superheroes do, apparently, is always immediately start beating down on each other. This was one of the more interesting twinges of the show, which is that the guy that they're fighting over ends up getting arrested, and then he gets killed in jail by the people that were getting him involved in the stuff in the first place, the Hand. And so this is when Luke Cage goes after Iron Fist because it's like, your way of doing things is wrong. You're beating on these people that don't have much of a choice, like they're struggling to survive and they're in a bad situation, and you're beating up all of them instead of the people that actually lead these organizations and the people that cause this to happen. And it's not an unfitting response, and it should be a wake up moment for Iron Fist, and it kind of is, because Iron Fist is like, yeah, I should stop punching a bunch of random thugs that are just random street people that, yeah, they made the mistake of actually being willing to get involved in these organizations, but that's the entire basis of the hand, is that they prey on the underprivileged and so on, and give them what looks like a better life so that they can trick them into getting involved in these horrible things for them. It's their whole strategy. And so, like, just by fighting them, you're just fighting a bunch of kids from off the street, as opposed to like the evil people that actually cause everything in the first place. It's ineffective. Iron Fist takes the wrong lesson from this, I would say, which is that I need to look up name real quick because I'm so bad at... There's so many cast members to keep track of sometimes. Is it Colleen Wing, I think, was the name of the character? Yeah. So Colleen Wing is Iron Fist's compatriot. She's an ex-hand member, and she's like, we need to sneak in there and take them out and stuff like that. And Iron Fist is like, no, I've been showed that there's a new way to do things. And his new way to do things is just to walk in the place, walk into the boardroom full of all of his like top villains of the entire show, and be like, I'ma punch you. And that's his strategy. He's like, I am Danny Rand and I will destroy you. I say, alone, standing in the middle of a place surrounded by your people. I'm like, what are you doing? Danny, no. What is your brain sometimes? I just don't understand. Because, like, they want to frame it like what their decision, like, they want to frame it like his decision is motivated by Luke Cage, but Luke Cage is just like, hey, stop beating on old lackeys. That's not actually solving your problem, and it's just hurting people that don't have anywhere else to go. And so your response is to be stupid. Like, the part where Colleen is like, hey, we need to sneak in again and stuff like that. Like, you can sneak in with your friend that has a katana and have backup, and generally just have a better plan than just walking face first and just punching people, but that's all you ever do, so okay, let's just keep going through this song and dance. But conveniently, this becomes the setup for all four defenders to all show up at the same time, because Luke Cage shows up right when Danny's in trouble, and it's the kind of... I feel like the kind of... maybe I missed something, but I feel like they kind of hand-waved how he got there, or why he got there at the exact moment, and what was going on, because like he's just there. Like, Danny had to get like permission, and he had to know where to go, and like Luke Cage just goes exactly to the right spot at the right time and none of the hoops Danny went through, so that was a little weird, but sure, there he is. It's kind of garbage. Thankfully, this is all flanked with a much more interesting storyline, which is Daredevil and Jessica Jones, because once they encounter each other... By the way, Jessica Jones in general is like really good in the show. She's the main highlight of like the first two episodes, because everybody else is just kind of not doing a whole lot, and there's not a ton interesting going on, and it's not too entertaining. But Jessica Jones is basically we're just getting an extension of the Jessica Jones show for a bit there, because she's doing an investigation and she's uncovering the secrets. She finds this whole story arc where like somebody that has like plans to like blow up a building with a bunch of C4, and like that's all set up for stuff that comes up later, and like she's doing that while being Jessica Jones, so like she's playing the entertaining character from the previous season. And then she crosses paths with Daredevil when she gets into legal trouble, which is what I said before, and that leads to a situation where she's now uncovering Daredevil's identity relatively easily, because she's a PI and he's not as good at keeping his identity secret as he seems to think he is, and there's a lot of fun interplay between the two of them, and like with her tugging at the tugging at the knot that is Daredevil, and sort of unraveling things that he doesn't want unraveled. And there's a lot of pretty good interplay between those characters throughout the early episodes, and I enjoyed that stuff. And so they coincidentally happen to arrive at the same time. The reasons they're there generally make sense, although it's definitely convenient that they show up at the same time as Iron Fist and Luke Cage. But before long, all four of them are they're all in the penthouse of this building, and they're fighting the leadership of the Hand, which at this point is just Sigourney Weaver and a bunch of faceless lackeys that we'll probably never see again, and then Elektra shows up. Elektra is kind of a bummer as a villain. She becomes more and more prominent as the show goes on, and she's not going to do much interesting. She's very much a trope character we've seen way too many times before, which is that she's somebody who's now been brainwashed, and so now she's like, I don't love you anymore, and I'm going to kill all of you, and I don't know who I am. but there's constant suggestions along the way that maybe she's actually still in there because she keeps not killing the person she used to love in her old life, and it's just so tropey, and it all goes exactly where you think it's going to go, just note for note, step by step, with her slowly recovering her memories, and Daredevil constantly insisting, like, I'm not going to kill her, God, I can still reach her, and like all those obligatory scenes. By the way, like, if you feel like you've heard this conversation before about this brainwashed girl, get ready, because you're going to hear a lot of lines and a lot of plot points that you're just so used to by now from just how overused they are, and that it kind of speaks to what feels like when I talked before about how the show seems like it was really rushed, and it seems like they're rushing more and more lately. It feels like this was more of that, where it's like they couldn't do much story-wise, so the most generic things start to happen over the course of this series because they just couldn't go anywhere else with it. The only time the show really has any time to shine and through it all is just having interplay between the various characters, because the plotting and the villains are all just kind of blah, which is just unfortunate, because this is a cinematic universe that was birthed on having really good villains. So having the villains not be that great is just kind of a bummer. And they try to set that up again. They took lessons from characters like Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin and even Madame Gao and stuff like that when they're setting up Sigourney Weaver's Alexandra. She is this immortal character, and they will not stop dropping hints at how immortal she is, because she basically spends every single scene enjoying music or food or some kind of art or confectionery or something, and then getting confused about what decades, or like dropping hints that she knew the person who made it. Like, she'll listen to an orchestra and then she'll talk about the personality of the person who wrote the song, or she'll go eat food at a place and then she'll mix up Constantinople with Istanbul and stuff like that. Like, it's like, oh wow, yeah, all these cities rise and fall. I'm so old. Do you get how old I am? And I'm like, okay, this could be interesting if they go somewhere with it. But they kind of just spin their wheels for the entire show with Sigourney Weaver and then go nowhere with it. Almost every scene she has is her basically telling the Hand, like, we have to work together and this is our chance, and she's like being vaguely ruthless. Or her scenes are her reestablishing over and over again by eating somewhere or listening to music somewhere that she's been around for a very long time. Then her character is just kind of shuffled away. So we're in, because of this first showdown they have with also with Alexandra, but with Elektra and the Defenders, and you have Elektra not kill Daredevil. We then have I think it was after this was when we have Alexandra reacquiring everybody from the Hand, which is she brings in all these different characters that are the 5 members of the Hand. Turns out one of them was already there the whole time. There's a black guy in a suit that just seems like some dude, but apparently he's one of the Hand. There is 2 of the members of the Hand we've met before. One of them is Madame Gao, who is way more disappointing in the show, because after being like basically like lead villain for an entire season, now she's just a lackey for Sigourney Weaver, so she's almost always just boring, and all the mystique and control she seemed to have is kind of just waved away, because it becomes clear that she's just somebody that's just like, she's largely just taking orders, and it kind of undermines what was interesting about her before, where she seemed to always be in control and all-knowing and everything, even if that was like a whole thing that she was just kind of trying to put out there to intimidate people. She becomes just another lackey. Turns out the guy, the coffee shop hipster samurai guy from Iron Fist, one of the villains from that has a direct connection to Wing. He's one of the members of the Hand, apparently. He's back from the dead after dying in the Iron Fist series, because this is an organization that can just bring people back to life whenever they die, apparently. And then we have our first new character that we haven't heard about yet, which is that Alexandra goes to Japan and he recruits this one character that he just refuses to speak English ever, even though he clearly is talking to people who are speaking English. So he just like will insistently speak Japanese for the entire series from here on out. And he's like he's hunted some sort of endangered bear apparently, and he's carving it up in his high-rise suite, and it's like, okay, this is a setup. Is this guy some kind of mega ultra badass? We're gonna see do cool stuff later. The answer is no. This is basically the most noteworthy scene he has in the entire show, is his setup of like, wow, look at this intimidating guy in his creepy, expensive apartment carving up a bear. For the rest of the series, he just sucks. And the first fight scene I can remember him being in is one where he just shows up near Elektra, and Elektra just kind of takes him out, and he's like getting up and popping his shoulder back in later because he's like, oh wow, what a surprise, we've been betrayed by Elektra. And then by the end of the show, when they're in the final showdown, he you could confuse him for being one of the random lackeys, because there's so many people that are fighting the defenders, all wearing black, that are just getting taken out in like a couple hits, and it's like completely underwhelming. And one of them is that guy. He ends up like impaled on a piece of rebar, and I'm like, what did you do in this show? Why did you exist? The show sets you up as being a supervillain, and you get just thrown aside, which happens with another character too. Because as I said before, there was like a surprise that the black guy in the suit was a member of the Hand. Well, not surprisingly he's a member, but he is one of the Hand, like one of the 5 people. Because he's like, he seems like some dude that just walks around and orders people to do stuff. And he's generally disappointing too, because his introduction is so non-existent. He gets no dedicated scene really, so he just feels like in Suicide Squad, when they're setting up the characters, like every single character gets a musical intro and a title card and like a whole scene dedicated to setting themselves up, except Slipknot. Slipknot just shows up out of nowhere, and somebody's like, that's Slipknot, the guy that can climb anything. And it's like, wow, he's so important. I can tell he's important because you spent 2 seconds explaining who he was, and then about a minute later, Slipknot's dead because they need to show how the exploding collars work or whatever, the brain chips or whatever it was in that movie, because the whole point of Suicide Squad is that you're threatening to blow people up. So it's like, that guy gets blown up, so let's not spend time introducing him. We wouldn't want it to be a surprise that he dies. Similar things happen in this show. Like the black guy's the first one to die. He gets almost no introduction. He's apparently one of the Hand. They just hand waved. It's like something African overlord or something, and then we just get past it really quickly. And he never fights anyone, as far as I can remember. Never really does anything interesting. At one point, his people kind of try to kidnap Luke Cage, and then off camera, he's defeated and captured by Luke Cage. Off camera, I'll remind you, it's one of the Hand getting defeated and captured off camera. And then he spends the rest of the show tied up in a chair before trying to escape and getting his head chopped off by Stick. So he's the first member of the Hand to die. He didn't really accomplish much of anything. He seems to just suck. And this is when the illusion starts to collapse, because up until now I'm like, oh, maybe Sigourney Weaver has some kind of special powers. Maybe that she's got some sort of thing going on here, because she's got the same mystique that seems to be going on previously with Madame Gao. And I've always bought into the idea that Madame Gao would be some kind of powerful character, because how is she leading this entire ninja clan, and how is she able to do all these things? She must have something up her sleeve. But this dude was just some dude in a suit, and he got decapitated. And it's like, wow, all that immortality sure made you a badass, right? It's like, you just died? Okay. Sure. And then as we move forward, we found, before long, well, we'll get to that a little bit later, but around this time this was the period of time where all the characters are put together, which is one of the highlights of the show, is that you have all 4 characters together, the Defenders, and they are playing off of each other, and there's some witty banter between them, a lot of which is some of the fun stuff involving Jessica Jones and Daredevil again, where she keeps picking up on things about his secret identity, and there's just a lot of basically just sort of poking fun at the ideas of each other's characters here and there. Although one of the irritating things that keeps happening is that all these people have superpowers, and they all know other people that have superpowers, and they've encountered they're either villains or allies that have crazy forms of powers, while this is all supposed to be in the same universe as the Avengers, where the Avengers incident happened, and so on. And they should be prepared for a lot of stuff by now. Every time somebody suggests anything vaguely supernatural or surprising or unusual ever, half the cast is like, no way, you believe this bullshit? Pfft, I'm out of here. And then they keep doing that over and over again. It's really frustrating. I'm like, how? This is the 6th season of this universe. that also is supposed to take place in the same universe as the movies where other crazy shit's happening. How do any of you even act surprised at this point when stuff gets introduced? Like, at this point, you should be like, that's a new one. And like, that should more or less be your reaction, as opposed to bullshit, I'm out of here. Which that stuff gets really, really frustrating. And also, speaking of the general sense of, you can also compare this a lot to the Avengers movie, because like there's the part where like we have an inciting incident that's supposed to bring them all together. The characters all fight each other. A few of the characters fight each other beforehand because frictions happen and they're superheroes. Then they all get stuck in one location where they have to bond for a bit and so on. There's the helicarrier in the Avengers movie, and then this one is a Chinese restaurant, Japanese restaurant. I didn't pay attention to super close to the surroundings necessarily, but they get stuck at a restaurant and they have to talk it out for a while, and that was more or less the setup for their characters actually interacting finally. But let's go forward a little bit. I was talking about the how weak the villains start to get. Like, before long, Sigourney Weaver dies too. It's like, oh, like on one hand, I'm like, I guess you're trying to be surprising, I guess, because she was set up as like the lead villain, and she dies like only a few, she dies with like multiple episodes left in the show. So it's like, okay, there goes Sigourney Weaver. Goodbye, I guess. But like, we've already pulled this trick with Luke Cage, where you kill off the villain surprisingly early, and they have to be replaced by another villain. So like that, you just did that like this year practically. So it's not that surprising when they pull the same trick again. And instead, it's just disappointing because I'm like, wow, that Alexandra character didn't really go anywhere. She wants immortality. She's dying, and she's raising this Elektra character, and then she dies. Okay. So then Elektra takes over. Well, actually, before that, what's really silly is that they have captured Iron Fist by this point, who is just being the biggest idiot again, because they found out at this point that whatever the Hand are planning, the Hand require the Iron Fist for whatever they're planning. So Danny is an idiot because he's always an idiot. And they're all like, okay, we need to hide Danny. We need to keep him away from the Hand because they need him, clearly. And Danny is completely against this, and he refuses and will even fight them over it. And it's like, how are you this stupid? Their plan requires you. So the best way to fight them is to not let them get you. How is this hard to communicate? I hate this character so much. I'm so sick of Danny Rand. So he's an idiot, and they basically have to knock him out and capture him, his own teammates, in order just to stop him from walking directly into enemy clutches, which of course helps the Hand capture him, because now he's incapacitated, and that's a whole can of worms of itself. But if you just cooperated, you wouldn't get captured, because you could just go like anywhere else. I don't think they have a tracking device under your skin. Like, it should be relatively easy to hide somebody on the face of the planet while the rest of the crew figures out how to deal with this. But instead, no, you gotta be a problem for the crew and end up getting yourself captured anyway. Thanks a lot, I suppose. So while Danny's captured, Sigourney Weaver's character is like, she says the thing that is always one of the biggest signposts for this is a rushed, poorly written thing, and the story has no ideas, which is Sigourney Weaver says the line, paraphrasing, "We're not so different, you and I," which is what villains say when they are bad villains, basically. It's the most boring shit to do ever. But it gets worse, because in that very scene, Sigourney Weaver gets murdered by Elektra after Iron Fist is out of the room. And then Elektra, in the very next episode, also walks up on Iron Fist and says, once again, "We're not so different, you and I." They pulled the same shitty line twice. They phrased it differently and stuff, but it's that line that you do when you just have a not so well-written villain and they encounter one of the protagonists, and they're like, that's just the shitty thing they'll do when you don't have any other ideas. They'll be like, we're just alike, aren't we? Ha ha ha. It's like, no, man. stop. And so twice in a row, Iron Fist gets to go like, I'm nothing like you, and stuff like that, which is just like the exact, I mean, if there's a character to give it to, it's Iron Fist, because he's the most boring protagonist, so he's exactly the person that would be in that kind of irritating exchange multiple times. But wow, how did that get into the show? How did that happen twice? How did they do that line of dialogue twice? I just don't understand. So up until now, we don't really know a ton about what's going on with the hand. They have some plan. There are clearly all like characters that lived on forever, so their plans something to do with immortality, but also Elektra for some reason. She's the Black Sky, which is something. Is she just a weapon? Is she that boring? She seems to be that boring. Like she's just meant to be a weapon and that's it. Because like they don't really elaborate on the Black Sky very much, and they don't really even seem to talk about the concept of Black Sky. As the show goes on, they just say it less and less. It actually gets really repetitive having Sigourney Weaver constantly be in a scene over and over again with Elektra, constantly saying over and over again that you used to be Elektra, but you're not Elektra. You're better than Elektra. You're the Black Sky, the weapon of the hand. And like, I feel like there must have been 4 or 5 scenes where that whole speech happens over and over again, and they just reiterate it and they don't expand on it. They're not escalating things. They're not progressing things forward. Like this is not going forward at all. It's just reiterating the same idea over and over again that you're not Elektra, you're the Black Sky. That's your entire character, is the struggle between being Black Sky and being Elektra, where Elektra is a character that was established over half of a season, and Black Sky is a vague concept that will never really be elaborated, ever. And it's just not an interesting conflict because you kind of already know what's going to happen, which is that, oh, she loves Daredevil, they're gonna fight until they break, and then she's going to be like, oh, I am Elektra, maybe. And that's exactly what happens, which is frustrating. So at this point, Elektra kills Sigourney Weaver. So Sigourney Weaver's dead, Alexandra. So now 2 members of the Hand are dead, and of the remainder now we're down to just the 2 characters of the Hand that we already knew, with one of the villains from Iron Fist and one of the villains from, which one was it again? Oh, the villain from Daredevil. Well, also Iron Fist, actually. Yeah, they're both villain. The 2 villains you see in Iron Fist are Madame Gao and cult leader that I forget the name of, Starbucks cult leader. I keep forgetting what his name is because he's also not too interesting, because he's also like, come to the dark side is every conversation he has. That's one of the really, really like crushing things about the writing whenever villains show up, is they just say the same things over and over again. Every scene between Alexandra and Elektra is the same scene over and over again. Every scene between Wing and Starbucks cult leader is the same conversation of like, you could still join me, come back to the Hand, we could rule together, you and I, and stuff like that. Just, I think the conversation happens like 5 times as they fight with swords over and over again. I'm like, how is this show affording to waste so much time in an 8-episode season? It only has 8 episodes, yet there's so much repeated ideas and so much nothing going on. It's just like, come on, man. Like, you can do better than this, right? Like, I've seen you do better, because you did it for like 30 hours of episodes before it started getting really iffy. It's like something must be going on in the background that is just like compromising their ability to make quality content at some point, because like this is just going downhill in a way that it just wasn't before. And I'm kind of worried that we're gonna have a chance to ruin characters. Like, are we gonna get a Daredevil season 3 where like Kingpin gets out again and starts showing up again because he's been established to still be around, but now he's just a shitty, boring villain? Because I kind of don't want to watch the show ruin Kingpin, because they were doing cool stuff with him before. And I'm really worried that's going to happen now. There's a bunch of plotting that goes on. Oh, wait, right. There's the obligatory scene that happens. Like, I just watched Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2 and the Ghostbusters remake all back to back over the course of like 4 days or so. And what stood out to me is that Ghostbusters 1 and 2 both do the same scene, which is that they, after a bunch of not really being aware of what's going on, there's the obligatory scene where the bad thing that's happening in the background hits a crescendo and gets really bad, and then the Ghostbusters, right when they are figuring out what's happening, they get arrested. And then in jail or the psychiatric ward, they're formulating a plan about what they're going to do about the bad thing, and they find a way to get out of prison so they can go deal with the bad thing, basically, which is usually caused by like the bad thing getting worse, and then the government being like, we better get those Ghostbusters guys to do something because we don't have any idea what we're doing. And that's kind of what happens here again. So I'm like, oh, this scene, great. Which is that the guy they've captured Iron Fist, and the Iron Fist is the key to their plans, the hand. So this is Elektra had just defeated everybody in the Defenders, and just in case you're wondering, this is still them not like. I've talked about how like they kind of fail to establish the hand as a proper threat in this show. Like 2 of the characters just die without doing much of anything, and one of them is just going to be a goon, and they generally just don't do anything badass. Their army's apparently gone, / occasionally shows up as a bunch of people just wearing black shirts and not even vaguely intimidating. And then, so the only intimidating part of the hand is Elektra. And Elektra will never really fully conquer the Defenders in any scene. So even she is not introduced as being that incredibly threatening. And this is the one scene where she does defeat everybody, kind of. Which is that it's the scene where Danny he's been captured by his own people because they're trying to restrain him from just charging straight into the hand like a jackass. And at this point, Stick has decided to just execute Danny because that'll stop the hand's plan. So Stick has put out this gas that wipes out Luke Cage, just knocks him unconscious, and that also reaches Danny. So what happens is Elektra comes in and fights Stick, but Stick's not in a great shape right now because when he was introduced to this season of the show, he was already captured by the hand, so he had to cut off his hand. So, cut off the hand, get it? So he's a one-handed samurai right now fighting against Elektra. So Stick dies. Luke Cage and Iron Fist are preemptively unconscious. Jessica Jones and Daredevil show up just in time to try to help and both get defeated. So this is like the peak of Elektra's power in the show as the most threatening villain of the entire show, is that in one fight she kind of happens to knock out both Daredevil and Jessica Jones. But once again, like, everyone gets to live because Elektra never kills anybody. She doesn't kill Luke Cage, which that might be hard, but she doesn't kill Jessica Jones. She doesn't kill Daredevil because of the whole love thing, but like, why didn't she kill Jessica Jones? She has to capture Iron Fist, but she keeps not killing important characters. So like, that's the most threatening Elektra is over the course of the entire show, and so it's kind of hard to buy the threat that is the hand in general, because their most threatening character is a character who never ever kills anybody except for a bunch of faceless goons that she trains against, basically. So we're at the police precinct with the remaining characters. Everybody else who is not Iron Fist is now, they wake up at the police station because apparently they all got rounded up. They're all like, we found you with 2 bodies. What's going on here? But they kind of get hand waved away, like, it's fine. You're like, there's some threatening of arresting them all, but also they're like really hands off. Like, half of them are only considered to be witnesses instead of suspects and stuff. And this gives them the chance to do the Ghostbusters scene where everybody talks together about like, this is the situation. This is the bad thing that's going to happen. This is the plan. We're going to take them all out. And then they just burst through a wall and leave, and they just take out. They just take off out of the police station, and I'm like, you know what? They haven't really established the hand as being that threatening. And like, at this point, 2 of them are dead. You don't know that, but you killed one of them, and he was just some dude. Like, the guy in the suit was just a dude, and you decapitated him, and he died, and that was it. Why not tell the police? Honestly, you're right here. This poor woman, God, what's her name? Misty Knight from Luke Cage's show. She's like, let us help you. Like, what are you doing? Tell us what the problem is. We can take care of it. And I'm like siding with her on some level. I'm like, yeah, just let them take care of it. They've got guns. They can go in with a SWAT team and they can just go wipe out this horde of people that are like that have been plaguing New York constantly. But because it's a superhero show, they have to be like, no, we have to defend you. Let's not let the police do their job, the people that are willing to do this and like they know the risks and all that. No, let's do it ourselves because we're way more capable, which gets really distressing because it quickly devolves into them being like, we're going to commit domestic terrorism. I'm like, what? Just tell the police. Just tell the police. You clearly don't know what you're doing if the first plan you can come up with is to commit domestic terrorism in the middle of New York, by the way. people don't tend to respond well to you blowing up a building in New York, like unexpectedly. It's not a great time. Maybe don't do that plan with the domestic terrorism. No. Bad idea. But they're gonna do it. Great. Fuck. Tell the police. Just tell the police. It's fine. They could just shoot them all. They're not bulletproof. They're not really. If you can kill them with decapitations, you can kill them with headshots. Like, what? If there are rules here that determine that these people can't just be murdered by a SWAT team, you've not established them. Like, the whole thing that made the Purple Man compelling was knowing what was at stake and what the rules were. And these guys, like, you just have like a bunch of stupid lines like Jessica Jones being like, these people just get more dangerous. I don't remember the first half is like, they don't get backed in the corner, or like, they don't just get weaker over time or whatever. Like, there's some setup and then like, they just get more dangerous as opposed to like getting weaker over time. Like, she has this weird line and I'm like, Jessica Jones, you don't know the Hand. You're the character that has the least impact with the Hand, and up until now, you never have encountered them until this scenario. How do you know they get more dangerous over time? What? Like, you can't just take them out with the police. We have to handle this. It's like, it's really hard to buy the motivations of what's going on here at some point when they're risking so much. Although, at the same time, you don't have a super strong grasp on what's at risk sometimes, because you're just like, what's going to happen if they win? They just get to live forever? I'm not sure. Black Sky? Maybe if they say Black Sky 17 more times, I'll have better grasp on what's happening right now. So they've kidnapped, they're all going in, they've escaped the police officers. Obligatorily, like, freaking, well, it makes sense that Wing is there, but Claire Temple shows up too, because Claire Temple just is everywhere. She's Night Nurse. She might as well have her own Netflix show at this point, because she's the one character that binds all of them together. By the way, I'll give them credit. They subverted my expectations with her, which is that this show, they so closely follow the structure of the Avengers that I was like, oh, Night Nurse is dead. She is so dead. Because I was so sure that Night Nurse was going to get murdered in exactly how Coulson was killed in Avengers, and fill that exact role of like being like the uniting thing that everyone is like fighting for and stuff like that, because it's the one character from everyone's movies. But no, she gets out just fine. But it's still slightly strange that she's even there with her total lack of combat abilities, and like even there, like before long, everyone's having to defend her and stuff like that. I'm like, why did she come here into this horrible situation that is too dangerous for the police? What is the logic here? What is going on? Why are you here? It's especially weird because every other character, and by now they've rounded up everyone's loved ones into the police station. So like basically just the supporting cast of every show is all rounded up in the police station. And some of this, and it's actually some of the best storytelling that happens in this show at times, is some of the melodrama that comes up between various heroes and their characters that are at the police station, because it's like various people trying to like pull them away from doing this, and like, and the background struggles between each character, and like obviously like at this point like Foggy and the other woman, I have so many names to keep track of. They want Daredevil to pull back and stop this, and like he's going to destroy himself at this rate, and like they're not wrong. And some of those scenes are some genuine drama, but because this show is only 8 episodes long and it's stretched so thin across like a supporting cast of like, there might be 10 of them even, because most of these characters have 2 supporting cast members. They only have like a few seconds to go with, like Hogarth shows up for like a minute in this entire show. Like, that's how thinly stretched all these characters are for each cast member. But at this point, they're all rounded up there, so that makes it extra weird that Claire specifically is going to be the one person who goes on this mission, whereas all these other people that are all still staying at the police station. It's just a strange choice. But Claire actually manages to further diminish the power of the Hand, because at some point, members of the Hand come in and to where Claire is located during this whole scenario and attack her, and she actually defeats one of them, and I'm like, is the Hand supposed to be dangerous or not? Because like, she's a nurse. Like, I know she went over to like Wing's place every now and then, and they'd practice a little bit of martial arts and stuff like that, but like, these people she's like Night Nurse. She's busy. She's got shit to do. Like, so a few lessons here and there making her so badass that she can defeat these the hand. Like, the hand just feels completely non-threatening. They just feel like the faceless bodyguards that show up in every movie ever. So like, I'm like, what's dangerous about this organization exactly? Elektra? At this point, Elektra is the most dangerous part of the organization, and even she is just another person. She's just another member of the group that likes to fight people, and there she goes. Like, she's gonna punch people, and she wants immortality. I'm like, this is okay. So take her down. You can do it. Obviously, you've basically done it before. Elektra got defeated more or less. Maybe not full on defeated, but she has been like incapacitated moment to moment in earlier fights of this thing, so even she's not that badass. We're coming up to when things get even dumber, which is that it's revealed that there's like a gate to Kunlun, there we go. A lot of names to keep track of. There's like a gate to Kunlun or some Kunlun equivalent down underneath this big building. It's the same pit from the Daredevil season 2, and Danny knows that he's the key to opening it. They've explained this over and over again, that the Iron Fist is the key to opening this gate. So what does he do? He immediately starts fighting Elektra in front of the gate, and he uses the Iron Fist, and I'm like, how do you get this stupid? Like, she can't kill you because she needs the Iron Fist. You literally had your one job in this scenario is to stall, basically. Like, you've got to stall while your friends hopefully arrive to help, because you clearly can't defeat Elektra on your own, because you generally kind of suck. And your one job is just to not open the gate for them. And he uses the Iron Fist, and Elektra, like, literally just, like, traps his... He has, like, what are they called? Size? No. It's skipping my brain right now, but the weapons that Raphael uses in TMNT, basically, the little forked dagger things, she uses those to just, like, cage his Iron Fist, and then just push it into the door to open it. I'm like, God damn it. You were even... Not only was Danny dumb enough to use the Iron Fist, knowing that it was how you open the thing, but he did it at the door, like standing right next to the door they're trying to open with the Iron Fist. I'm like, how? How is this a person? How is he this stupid? This isn't even like, wow, I'm a fish out of water. I'm from a mystical land, and I'm so surprised by normal city life. It's like, no, this is literally your wheelhouse, is the mystical shit that opens with the Iron Fist, magical doors, magical fists, all this shit. It's the most normal shit ever to you, and you're still the most uselessly stupid person. So good guys show up, everybody fights, it goes exactly how you think it is. There are 3 remaining members of the Hand. As I said before, the Japanese guy, you blink and you miss him. All that setup for him being a badass, and he just, like, gets dispatched in a moment's notice, just like everybody else. There's no particularly cool fight scenes. The show tries really hard in this underground area to set up the Avengers shot, kind of, but in reverse. Because the Avengers shot was when they all turn back to back against each other in the street, and the money shot happens, basically, where this camera's spinning around them. In this one, they try to do a shot where all 4 of them are fighting in 4 different quadrants of the room, and the camera is spinning slowly to show them all fighting. It's like, wow, it's a continuous shot of them all fighting, but it's so unimpressive, because 3 of them just punch people. Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and Iron Fist, they just punch people. They're just not interesting fighting characters. And Daredevil never has the chance to have something like the hallway scene from Daredevil Season 1, so he doesn't have really cool scenes either. He's just jumping a bit when he punches people, because he's the acrobatic-looking one. So, like, the drama of, like, wow, look at them all fighting is so boring, because it just looks like a bar fight. It looks like the Linkin Park music video for Bleed It Out, where it's just a big crowd of people punching each other. I'm like, okay, sure. Like, the action is not the thing to come to the show for, which is the unfortunate thing, because this action is the primary focus. Like, the 4 setups of the 4 characters are mostly plot-driven and dialogue and scenarios, but Defenders is really heavy on action scenes, but the action scenes are almost always these rapidly edited punching scenes in dark hallways that just aren't interesting, unfortunately. it's just like, we have to have a fight, so let's set up a fight. Everyone punches each other. There we go. Okay. But like I said, as you blink, if you blink, you miss the Japanese guy dying. Or not dying, but getting impaled. Madame Gao has a few scenes where she like uses force push a little bit to be like, oh look, I have a little bit of power because I'm just a woman with a cane, but I can do that. But before long, she just retreats from the fight altogether. This leaves the only remaining member of the Hand being Wing's mentor. So naturally, you have the Luke and Vader scene of those two fighting it out while he constantly is like, you could join me, this power could be yours, and stuff like that, until he finally dies. And I'm like, that's over with, I guess. Man, this ending is so boring. And it's so borrowed. And so there's so many borrowed elements of like you have the Luke Vader showdown, you have various characters being dispatched in really boring ways. You have the idiot protagonist opening the door for the bad guys. And then during the final showdown stuff, you even have a scene where Daredevil's like making a heroic sacrifice because he's going to hold off Elektra while everyone else escapes. And he tells Iron Fist, take care of my city. And then they all leave without Iron Fist. Without Daredevil. And Daredevil is like left to fight one-on-one against Elektra in this underground doomed area while everything's set to explode. And like that's when Elektra finally breaks and it's like, oh, I love you, and like I love you too, and then they explode and they get buried down there, and it's like, god damn it. There were no surprises in Elektra's storyline either. Like, it was so note for note. Like, the moment you're introduced to this character existing, you know how every note of her story is going to work. And that's the unfortunate thing, is like there's no I think that's the takeaway, is that this show feels rushed, so that there's no flourishes, there's no twist, there's no interesting developments, there's no little like nuggets of detail in the characters that surprise you. Instead, the moment the show's setup begins, you can pretty much say how the show's going to end accurately without even watching the rest of it, because it's so tropey and so by the numbers that like it just feels like straight to DVD action stuff. It feels like Steven Seagal movies and things like that. The only real upside is like the snappy dialogue that happens in a few handful of scenes where the characters are together for reasons other than just fighting constantly. But like, this was not the victory lap it should have been, basically. Because like the previous movies, like Iron Man caught people by surprise in Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then all the follow-up ones were all generally seen as being fine. But Avengers was like an explosion. It was an event. Like, wow, look at this amazing thing. These characters that people have liked are all being mixed together into this cool scenario, and that movie's great, and we're having a great time. Box office blow away like crazy celebration victory movie, whatever. I'm a little burned out because I've been doing this for a while now, I think. How long are we in? Jesus, how have I been talking for over an hour? I didn't think I'd be able to talk for more than 20 minutes. That's always the case, though. But instead of that victory, it just kind of feels like, side story. The bad guy shows up, everybody punch the bad guy, it's over. Like it really does feel like I've been watching The Flash a lot lately. Just watching through the show. I'm all caught up, I think. And every season of The Flash, there's a crossover episode where the CW takes the increasing number of side stories and characters and shows they're establishing, because now they have Supergirl, and they have Arrow, and they have Guardians of the Universe, and a bunch of other side characters. So once per season, The Flash will be like, here's all these characters in one location, together, at the same time. Super Showdown. And that'll happen. And it's like, it's always bad. Like, as somebody who likes the show The Flash, it's always disappointing to be at the crossover episodes, because it's like, oh, a poorly defined villain's going to show up and have a vague, threatening goal, and way too many protagonists are going to be thrown into the scenario, and none of them are going to have time to breathe, and it's all going to be very by the numbers, and I'm not going to be surprised by anything, and I just have to wait for it to be over so I can get back to the thing I liked. And that's probably the best case scenario here, too, is I can just be like, well, Defenders is over. I can now just go back to watching the shows when they come back when they make a sit, because they're working on Jessica Jones season 2. Looking forward to that. Working on Punisher. Looking forward to that. I really like the Punisher. I really like Jessica Jones. If they are of quality comparable to their first appearances, then they'll be a great time again. And I just hope that's my hope for the Netflix universe here, is that they can fix it, or they can return to form, because this could be the same bad idea that the DC, was it Masters of the Universe? No. Whatever the time travel storyline is, where they take way too many characters and mix together with and go on missions and stuff. I'm hoping that this was just like the misstep, like, oh, that crossover didn't work out, and then they just return to the individual shows being pretty great on their own. But I'm a little worried that the seemingly rushed schedule that seems to have marred this show and Iron Fist might still keep happening. And if that does keep happening, it might hurt Jessica Jones and Punisher, and they may not get the decent shows that they probably should get. So we'll see. Overall, Defenders isn't aggressively bad. Like, it's not insultingly bad. It's not an aggressively low quality show. It's just so flat and uninteresting. It's the type of thing you just switch off your brain and you just watch shit happen for a while, and you're like, that used up my week of television viewing time. Time to go watch the next thing. But if you were hoping for something better, if you're hoping something more like Daredevil season 1 and Jessica Jones season 1 and less like Iron Fist, then you're going to be disappointed. Or presumably were already, because this is a spoiler cast, so you presumably watched it already and just decided you wanted to watch somebody else talk about it for a while. So that's my takeaway. This was like a trial idea test run of me doing a solo spoiler cast, because like I said, nobody else that does these with me even watched any of these Netflix shows, so it's pretty much just me that has opinions on this stuff, and I didn't want to take up more podcast time discussing this stuff. I am working on the Mass Effect Andromeda spoiler cast. I forgot for a while there. I promised at the end of Mass Effect Andromeda that I'd do a discussion of it, because there's just too much to discuss, and we'll hopefully get to that soon. Hopefully. Not sure when. What happened is, once I finished Mass Effect Andromeda, my brain just sort of rejected the game entirely, in that I just stopped thinking about it. And it was nice. I just forgot the game existed for a while. But then I got a comment that was like, oh, you're not doing the Mass Effect Andromeda spoiler cast after all, aren't you? That's disappointing. I really wanted to see it. And I'm like, oh, fuck. And it like all started coming back to me. Like, no, these memories are all coming back. So I'm working on that. It's less like this, where I can just talk. Honestly, I probably could have prepared notes for this too, because it started to become more difficult than I expected to just organize my thoughts. But I'm working on that for Mass Effect Andromeda. I'm working on a series of bullet points for the things I want to discuss, because there's just too much to sort in my head at once to discuss all the thoughts on that stuff. There also might be a spoiler cast coming up for Death Note, because Netflix made an American Death Note live action movie, and Andrew and I are probably going to have opinions on that one, because we both watched Death Note previously, the original version of it, and boy, not looking encouraging, those trailers. So we'll see how that goes. Thanks for watching. If you liked Defenders, I don't begrudge you anything. Everyone can like what they want and so on. I don't like even having to say that, but apparently you have to sometimes, because people are all like, you're stating your opinions like they're fact. It's like, no, do you not understand the concept of like a review or a discussion? It's like, no, it's just, this is my take on Defenders, is that I see it as a giant misstep, just like Iron Fist was, and I hope they do better, because I have been hyped about these shows. I've been hyped every time a new Netflix Marvel show comes out. I'm hyped about watching it, until Iron Fist and Defenders happen, and I'm like, oh fuck, that's not great. And the best I can hope for is that, because a bunch of different people work on each part of this universe, that the people who made the good stuff in the past can hopefully still make good stuff in the future, and the people that guided these not so great things can just be forgotten. We'll just move on past that stuff, hopefully. But that was my take on the Defenders. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.